Right now, Durban North residents have been experiencing water supply disruptions for the past few days. The disruptions are due to rapid algae growth caused by high temperatures. Joining us to give us an update is Siyabonga Maphumulo, the Umngeni-uThukela spokesperson. Thank you so much, Bab Maphumulo, for your time and for joining us this evening. Let's perhaps start with you just giving us an update on the current situation regarding the algae clogging the filters. How dire is the situation?
Good evening, and thank you for having us. The algae situation has been brought under control, while the algae itself has not been brought under control from the source where we get the water from, which is the Albert Falls and the Nagle Dam, which in turn then feed into our Durban Heights water treatment plant. But through our processes that we've put in place to counter this problem, we have been able to improve the output of water that we are supplying to parts of the eThekwini municipality. When we started encountering the increased growth in algae, we had a 21 megaliter deficit of water supply, and we have over the past few days managed to bring this down to about 8 megaliters in terms of the deficit. So we have brought the situation under control. It is not quite where we would like it to be, but it has drastically improved from the past 6 days or so when we first encountered the algae outbreak.
So talking about that improvement and improving the output, what would you say is the estimated timeline for completely resolving the issue? How long do you expect the supply disruptions to last?
Well, because algae is a naturally occurring phenomenon which is elevated by a number of factors in the water sources from where we draw the water, being the Albert Falls and Nagle Dam, not excluding the increased temperatures in the summer months, which we are all but entering, as well as elements such as pollution. We do anticipate that this problem will be with us for some time unless the behavior is modified by the pollutants of our water resources. And among these, we count agricultural practices such as herbicides. We also count just pollution emanating from solid waste being disposed into water sources. But nonetheless, on our side as Umngeni-uThukela Water, we anticipate that over the next 2 weeks or so, the situation would have been brought under control in terms of us modifying how we treat our water, the increased dosage of water, the increased chemicals of water, so that ultimately we ensure that the water that we supply to the residents of Durban and surrounds is of the same quality as when we are not having this algae challenge.
Let's just speak a little bit with regards to the conditions that have led to this situation. I mean, you haven't ruled out pollution as a potential cause, but there's also quite a big contribution with regards to the high temperatures in the area.
Yes, that is correct. While temperatures do have an impact as well as lower water volumes, we have found that the increased incidence of pollution in the natural water sources is the main driver of algae. Earlier this week, the Deputy Minister of Water and Sanitation, David Mahlobo, convened a meeting between ourselves and Umngeni-uThukela Water, where he really explained that the Department of Water and Sanitation, who really regulates natural water sources, would be taking a tougher line stance against those who are found to be depositing pollutants into the water, such that they are actually brought to book and even fined, because we simply cannot have a situation where, notwithstanding natural environments, some of the elements that lead to this algae growth are attributed to human behavior, which, as we have earlier said, we do not rule out practices by the agricultural community, as well as human settlement trends where people settle near water sources and actually pollute wastewater treatment works or stormwater works, which become blocked, and ultimately what you have is an increased incident of pollution that ends up in our dams and ultimately in our water treatment plants, in this case being the Durban Heights water treatment works.
And speaking of that pollution, what exactly are people depositing into those waters, be it from residents or businesses?
The main drivers from the farming community, for instance, we found that the increased incidence of pesticides, herbicides, etc., poultry farming practices crocodile farms, and in terms of wastewater, it is solid waste that we finds its way into river sources. So all of these issues then result in an increased incidence of algae and other pollution that comes to our treatment works.
Just in your conversations with members and residents of those areas, how have these disruptions affected them, and what feedback are you receiving from the communities?
Well, certainly any disruption in water supply is frustrating to communities, but we have made them understand that it's a necessary evil, that we rather reduce the quantities of water that we supply as opposed to supplying water at similar volumes, but where the quality is compromised. So because there's been increased backwashing, dosing, as well as the cleaning of our filters, what we then said was we would rather limit the quantities a bit of the water that we are supplying. So basically, we have been spending more time in the purification of our water, which then we ensure that it is in line with SANS 241 and is actually of higher quality. Yes, it might be at a decreased volume, but we still ensure that it's been adequately treated and has been cleansed of the polluting factors, namely the algae.
Speaking of that treatment, I mean, the city has employed advanced chemical treatment methods. What long-term strategies are being considered to prevent similar situations in the near future?
We've put in place a number of interventions. We've also are in partnership with the Water Research Commission, where we improve our elements of actually identifying the challenges before they materialize to higher algae presence in the water. We've also increased our own monitoring of the water sources so that we have advanced notifications, not excluding the use of satellite images to ensure that if this algae threatens to bloom, as has been the instance, we are able to react in a much faster and coordinated approach. But ultimately, it boils down to us modifying our behavior in terms of not polluting the river sources, and because no matter what type of interventions we put in place to treat this problem, we would be merely dealing with the symptom and not the actual cause, which, as we have articulated, is pollution in the main.
And while dealing with this problem, I can imagine that you are supplying some support to those communities that are without any water. Are there any additional support measures that are in place for residents that are affected by the water supply disruptions, and just providing alternative water sources or resources for those that are in need?
Yeah, well, fortunately, at this point, what we were dealing with was reduced water volumes as opposed to a complete shutdown. So while we do sympathize with our communities in the sense that they had reduced water volumes, and certainly there were some areas when we initially had this problem. Earlier, I mentioned that when it started earlier this week, we were at a 21 megaliter deposit, which would rather deficit, which would be about 21 million liters of water a day, but we quickly brought that down to only 8 megaliters. So it wasn't a case of a complete shutdown where we then would have had to deploy water tankers working with the city of eThekwini. It did not come to that point because we were able to quickly diagnose this issue and act against it, and the situation is slowly getting back to normal.
Lastly, just talk to us in terms of what message you'd like to put out to the residents of eThekwini. I mean, you've been mentioning the issue of pollution and the deposits that are made into some of these raw water resources. What assurances can you provide in terms of the water in future, and what message would you implore for residents to be doing during this time?
Well, firstly, as Umngeni-uThukela Water, we would like to prefer our profuse apologies to all our customers, stakeholders, in terms of the disruptions that have been experienced because of the increased incidence of algae. That said, we would also like to implore those who are the pollutants of our water sources, in the main industrial actors, in the main agricultural actors, as we have said, and also communities themselves who settle near water sources and deposit foreign materials into stormwater drainage, to desist from this kind of practice, because As we experience the warm summer months, yes, there is a natural phenomenon. We do get an increase in algae. And in foregoing years, we have been able to manage it. But with this kind of human behavior, it really becomes harder to manage. And ultimately, we end up feeling the brunt of activities that we could have desisted from. So we would really like to urge communities to work with us as Umngeni-uThukela Water by ensuring that our water sources are cared for in a manner that is befitting of ensuring that we then are able to supply water that is fit for human consumption.
All right, Siyabonga Maphumulo, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening.